Okay, welcome. I want to talk a little bit more about, well, this is actually a video that accompanies the blog I'm doing on agroecology and assessing all that. And so I want to look at this bed right here. This is a bed that I want to examine. Uh, and when I talk about the agroecology, I'm talking about primarily talking about the surface of the soil and protecting that, protecting the ecology of the surface of the soil. And you see it's very well protected, it's all grown over, and that's really what I'm shooting for. What I got going on in this bed is I've got these collards. They're North Carolina yellow. They're a wonderful collard, and I have them interplanted with these radishes. They're long radish called Cincinnati. They're an old heirloom. I got both of these seeds from Seed Savers Exchange. I've been collecting seed off them. It's interesting, the collards don't produce much seed, so it's taken a long time for me to accumulate seed from harvesting a seed crop off of them. So I'm not able to broadcast like I normally would with collards. I'm either planting them in drills or I'm actually transplanting them. But what's going on here? This interplanting concept, the way it works is these radishes, I'm going to get down here, these radishes are going to come out in a couple weeks because right now they're starting to overtake the collards. And so once they come out, the collards can continue to develop, and they'll eventually cover the bed up and create an open canopy that's also referred to as the living mulch. Now, once I get the radishes out here, I'll actually weed the bed. The way I weed beds is I let the plants grow, I let the weeds grow, I keep a cover over the bed, and once the plants are getting to the point where their leaves can overlap and they can start to create that living mulch or that canopy, only at that point will I weed the bed. So that way I only weed the bed once. But I do weed beds, I weed them once. And the weeds we have in here is like henbit, also referred to as stinging nettle, dead nettles. We have chickweed, we have some vetch, of course, coming up. Vetch is all over the place out here. And we have some grasses. And those are really not troublesome plants at all. The dead nettles or henbit stays low to the ground and provides a real nice cover, and so does the chickweed. So those are really not troublesome in any way. I got wires and netting over this bed because we're having some trouble with deer getting getting in through the fence. So that way we've got them taken care of. As we continue down the bed, by the way, all these beds most of the beds I do are 4 feet by 25 feet. That way, and I do that for research purposes. That gives me 100 square feet of planting space, so that's a good number for me to work from. Down here we've got some mole plants or castor beans. Some of them are planted, some of them are wild. There you can see we had a mild frost. This was our first frost. Here I've got carrots, the same thing. I don't think these are going to need much thinning, but they will need weeding. So pretty soon I'll actually weed this bed. And the same thing's true, it'll become a solid mass of carrots. I broadcast carrots. It's an art. It takes a long time to learn how to broadcast them without over-sowing them. But once you learn how to do that, it's a wonderful way to grow carrots. You want to space them so that they're 2 or 3 inches apart in these beds. Continuing on. Oh, and in rotation-wise, what I'll do is, like for instance, this is primarily going to be a leafy crop, and it's a small section. It's just for house. And I got other greens growing elsewhere here and there throughout the garden. So this is just one little patch of greens that I have. I'll probably come back in here behind these in the spring with a root crop because the collards are going to eat up a lot of the nitrogen. We don't want a high nitrogen soil when we grow root crops, otherwise it becomes more real leafy. So this would be a good rotation to come behind these with a leaf crop. And likewise, because this is a root crop, I'll probably come in behind these with a fruit crop. Now this isn't a big area, but I grow these old New Mexican family peppers that were passed on to me, and I'll probably grow some hot peppers because I only grow a small amount of them. So I could get 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 here. See, that's a 5 planting. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, about 18 inches apart. That'll provide me with 5 hot pepper plants, and they'll provide me with a lot of hot peppers because I'm only using them for personal use. Then we're going to get into a bed here that was just recently planted. This was garlic. It's a very late planting. We'll see how it does. And what we did was we just put a real light mulch over it until the garlic comes up. Once the garlic comes up, then we put a much thicker mulch on it. And then once it grows up through that, then we put a very thick mulch on it. So these will be mulched about 6 or 8 inches, maybe even 10 inches of mulch on top of these. Garlic likes that. It does very well. It doesn't fend well with weeds. As we get down in here, I want to look at the actual soil itself. This is the cover crop. Some cover crop, some weeds. Here we got vetch. There's vetch coming up throughout the bed. We have grasses coming up. And this is rye that was planted. There's clover planted in here. I don't see too much of it. I do see chickweed. I do see Johnson grass over here. Johnson grass can be a troublesome plant. You know, it's actually related to sorghum. Its name is sorghum alphense. That's its name. So it's a sorghum plant, but you can't make sorghum out of it. So anyway, there's more of the grasses coming up real nicely there. And the grasses are good cover crop because they provide silica for your soil. So I want to look at the actual soil itself and examine that with you, because what I'm looking for, what I want to convey here, is the importance of having a good tilth, which is the cultivation of the soil, and a good aggregate. Aggregate represents the not so much the composition, but the ability for the texture of the soil. So you see, if I hold the soil together, it holds together very well. It's kind of a loamy clay soil, but the fact that it sticks together well, it's not clay, it's not gummy, which is too much aggregate. It crumbles real nicely. When you dig soil, you want to make sure you got the right moisture content. If it's too dry, you break it up, you pulverize it, especially with the clay, because clay's got the most surface area of any soil, and you'll just destroy the texture of the soil. If it's too wet, of course, you'll force all the air out by digging it, and you'll basically make adobe, which is not good. Nothing wants to grow in that. Excuse me. So this has got a good tilt to it. It's got good texture. It's good for digging. It falls apart nicely. If I dig down about a foot, I'll see a profile where the topsoil, because of having put a lot of compost in the soil over the past 8 years, almost 9 years now, and with the cover crops that I've dug in, I've been able to create topsoil. I also, when I double dug the beds initially, I double dug these beds initially for the first 2-3 years, and in doing so, I opened up that clay so that air and water could flow through it. Once air and water can flow through it, life can start to inhabit those areas. There we're starting to see some earthworms. They're always a good indication. I've got a lot of earthworms. I get a lot more when it rains a lot because they come to the surface. If it's real dry, of course, they go way down deep. And they can do so because they've got deep cultivation. And there's insects and various things down in here. There's also a microcosmic activity going on, which we can't see with the naked eye. See, these vetch have very long roots on them. They're leguminous, so they're going to put a lot of nitrogen in the soil. And so we got this interaction of life going on that is also referred to as the web, the soil food web, kind of term that I run across a lot on the internet. And then the ideal is to keep this covered. Keep this covered at all times. So when I first double dug these beds, I actually introduced stuff down into the topsoil, sort of almost like a mini compost pile. And then I use effective microorganisms to help break it down. I use bokashi. I don't do that anymore. It was just like an initial introduction to get decomposition working to get bacteria and stuff into the soil, to get life into the soil. So these soils are very alive, and they're in different stages of life and during the different seasons of the year, and that's what I'm going after. And that's where the term agroecology comes into play. So anyway, that's something to think about, and you can refer to the rest of my blog. It goes into the activities that take place chemically and biologically, more so biologically in the soil, because if you're biologically healthy, if you have a biological healthy ecosystem in your soil, then you don't have to worry so much about the chemical inputs, because chemically it will be there, it will be balanced, and it'll be alive, because life attracts life, and we're trying to produce life out of here in this garden. So in order to do that, we want to put life in the soil. All right, well, thank you for listening. There's a lot more information in my blog, and there's even more information in my book, Radical Regenerative Gardening and Farming. Thank you for listening.